I'm going to record on the computer. Good morning. I just wanted to come talk a little bit more about public education and just where we are in America as African American people and what we should expect from the system, but what we should expect from the system, and what we should expect to be able to give to the system to ensure that access happens for our kids. Reality is that it's not happening for far too many African American children. So I want to talk about what the law says. So let's just look at a little short video that's going to talk about Title I parent involvement. And so that you kind of understand that parent involvement and community engagement in the public school system is an American value. And we all should concern ourselves with segments of population who are being prevented or prohibited from accessing the resources. So I'm getting ready to share the screen. Here we go, and start the video. I want to push play here.
TEA requires that all Title I schools provide staff with professional development each year to help them work more effectively with Title I parents. The following slides help ensure that we not only meet the requirement, but also improve parental involvement in order to improve teaching and learning. In order to ensure effective involvement of parents and to support partnerships between campuses, parents, and the community in order to improve academic achievement, each campus must educate teacher, pupil services personnel, principals, and other staff with the assistance of parents in the value and utility of contributions of parents and in how to reach out to, communicate with, and work with parents as equal partners in order to implement and coordinate parent programs and build ties between parents and schools. There are many advantages to working with parents as equal partners. We want to make sure that we have a strong parent involvement policy. Title I contacts can help provide information to the staff. Let's take a moment to review a video. Rita Pearson has been an advocate for children for 40 years of her life. She came from a family of educators and chose to follow the career path of teaching, just like her mother before her. Listen as Rita tells us about the importance of building relationships with your students.
I have spent my entire life either at the schoolhouse, on the way to the schoolhouse, or talking about what happens in the schoolhouse. Both my parents were educators. My maternal grandparents were educators. And for the past 40 years, I've done the same thing. And so needless to say, over those years, I've had a chance to look at education reform from a lot of perspectives. Some of those reforms have been good, some of them have been not so good. And we know why kids drop out. We know why kids don't learn. It's either poverty, low attendance, negative peer influences. We know why. But one of the things that we never discuss, or we rarely discuss, is the value and importance of human connection. Relationships. James Comer says that no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. George Washington Carver says all learning is understanding relationships. Everyone in this room has been affected by a teacher or an adult. For years, I have watched people teach. I have looked at the best and I've looked at some of the worst. A colleague said to me one time, they don't pay me to like the kids. They pay me to teach a lesson. The kids should learn it. I should teach it. They should learn it. Case closed. Well, I said to her, kids don't learn from people they don't like. She said, that's just a bunch of hooey. And I said to her, well, your year is going to be long and arduous, dear. Needless to say, it was. Some people think that you can either have it in you to build a relationship or you don't. I think Stephen Covey had the right idea. He said you ought to just throw in a few simple things, like seeking first to understand as opposed to being understood. Simple things like apologizing. You ever thought about that? Tell a kid you're sorry, they're in shock. I taught a lesson once on ratios. I'm not real good with math, but I was working on it. And I got back and looked at that teacher edition. I taught the whole lesson wrong. So I came back to class the next day and I said, look, guys, I need to apologize. I taught the whole lesson wrong. I'm so sorry. They said, that's okay, Miss Pearson. You were so excited. We just let you go. I have had classes that were so low, so academically deficient that I cried. I wondered, how am I going to take this group in 9 months from where they are to where they need to be? And it was difficult. It was awfully hard. How do I raise the self-esteem of a child and his academic achievement at the same time? One year I came up with a bright idea. I told all my students, you were chosen to be in my class because I am the best teacher and you are the best students. They put us all together so we could show everybody else how to do it. One of the students said, really? Said, really? We have to show the other classes how to do it. So when we walk down the hall, people will notice us. So you can't make noise. You just have to strut. And I gave him a saying to say, I am somebody. I was somebody when I came. I'll be a better somebody when I leave. I am powerful and I am strong. I deserve the education that I get here. I have things to do, people to impress, and places to go. And they said, yeah. You say it long enough, it starts to be a part of you. And so, I gave a quiz, 20 questions. Student missed 18. I put a +2 on his paper and a big smiley face. He said, Miss Pearson, is this an F? I said, yes. He said, then why'd you put a smiley face? I said, because you on the roll. You got 2 right, you didn't miss them all. I said, and when we review this, won't you do better? He said, yes, ma'am, I can do better. You see, -18 sucks all the life out of you. +2 said, I ain't all bad. For years, I watched my mother take the time at recess to review, go on home visits in the afternoon, buy combs and brushes and peanut butter and crackers to put in her desk drawer for kids that needed to eat, and a washcloth and some soap for the kids who didn't smell so good. See, it's hard to teach kids who stink. And kids can be cruel. And so she kept those things in her desk, and years later, after she retired, I watched some of those same kids come through and say to her, you know, Miss Walker, you made a difference in my life. You made it work for me. You made me feel like I was somebody when I knew at the bottom I wasn't. And I want you to just see what I've become. And when my mama died 2 years ago at 92, there were so many former students at her funeral. It brought tears to my eyes, not because she was gone, but because she left a legacy of relationships that could never disappear. Can we stand to have more relationships? Absolutely. Will you like all your children? Of course not. And you know your toughest kids are never absent. Never. You won't like them all, and the tough ones show up for a reason. It's the connection, it's the relationships. And while you won't like them all, the key is they can never, ever know. So teachers become great actors and great actresses, and we come to work when we don't feel like it, and we listen to policy that doesn't make sense, and we teach anyway. We teach anyway because that's what we do. Teaching and learning should bring joy. How powerful would our world be if we had kids who were not afraid to take risks, who were not afraid to think, and who had a champion? Every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists that they become the best that they can possibly be. Is this job tough? You betcha. Oh God, you betcha. But it is not impossible. We can do this. We're educators. We're born to make a difference. Thank you so much.
This is a copy of a pledge Rita used with her classroom daily. I am somebody. I was somebody when I came in. I will be a better somebody when I leave. I am powerful and I am strong. I deserve the education I get here. I have things to do, people to impress, and places to go. Rita passed away from cancer 5 years ago. The world lost an amazing educator, but we should all strive to leave a legend such as she. Now let's listen as Megan shares the one thing that teachers and parents can do to bridge the achievement and opportunity gap.
So the most transformative moment of my teaching career happened when I wasn't even teaching. It was when my son was born. I felt like I had been struck by a tidal wave of love. And when I found my feet again, everything in life had meaning and purpose. I realized that parental love is one of nature's great forces, and that all parents feel some version of this power. I returned to teaching from maternity leave with my heart open to the simple truth that parents love children. And I still try to remember every day that every child in every class I teach is the meaning of someone's life. Every child I teach is someone who deserves honor and respect. And now 4 years later, when I hear my son Dylan chatting up a neighbor about the newest Cinderella movie or complimenting a playground buddy on the color of their shirt, he reinvigorates my commitment to honor and respect young people. Good teachers do not have to be parents, but parents and teachers do have a lot in common. And I think sometimes teachers and parents forget that we want the same things for our kids. But in my 16 years of teaching, I've never met a parent or a teacher who didn't desperately want their child to succeed. When Dylan was about 2 years old, my husband and I were strolling with him through our neighborhood on a sunny Saturday afternoon. We were checking out all the neighbors' gardens, and we ran into a college acquaintance of my husband, who told us that his children attend the local gifted and talented magnet. And then he told us most of the children in this neighborhood go there. And I couldn't help but think, does geography determine giftedness? That can't be right. It must be that the resources available to families, which are greater in more affluent neighborhoods, determine academic performance. I read a recent study that compared zip codes and school funding and academic performance. And in this study, the researchers found that students from low-income families that attended high-income schools outperformed those who attended low-income schools, even if the low-income schools had the best and most expensive intervention. It's the human resources that make the difference. The student body, in which everyone just assumes that they'll be going to college. The faculty, made up of teachers that sought out career positions in calmly academic environments. And the parents with the resources and the time to run a PTA and to volunteer in school. So even with all of these parents and all of these teachers desperately wanting our children to succeed, not every child succeeds. And in America, the children that do and don't succeed are statistically predictable by family income and by race. This gap feels to me like the Grand Canyon. We used to call it the achievement gap, but I and teachers like me are renaming it the opportunity gap, because it is fundamentally about the resources and opportunities available to families. The opportunity gap is big. It's real. I see it every day in my classroom, and it's scary. And we all have a responsibility to unravel it, but I'm not going to unravel the whole thing today. Instead, I'd like to talk about one simple thing that teachers can do and one simple thing that parents can do to get our kids across that gap. When teachers reach out to parents and parents reach out to teachers, our connection bridges the gap. Every day, I see students working hard to cross the gap, and too often crossing the gap feels like this. Would you put the person who you love most in the whole world on that bridge? What if you didn't know what was on the other side, whether it was worth it or not? What if when you were a kid, you tried to cross the same gap and had a bad experience? What if the people on the other side didn't treat you very well? And what if the person you love is afraid? Every year, I take students on a service trip, and I have seen during the adventure part of our trip, hundreds of them face down ropes, courses, and rock walls. And some of them, like this courageous young woman, can overcome their fears. But for most of us, our aversion to risk is so great that we avoid anything that appears rickety or unreliable. For most of us, we need a better way across the gap. At first, I thought of teachers as the bridge builders in education. After all, we do create opportunities for our students to get across the gap every single day, but over time, I now realize that it's networks of schools and families and community groups that build the bridges. Programs like the National College Readiness AVID program, and in the district where I teach, the Power of You, which pays for all St. Paul Public Schools graduates to go to St. Paul College for free. Teachers do help build the bridges, but we have a more up close and personal role. We are down on the ground in the classrooms, and we know which students get on the bridge and get across and which ones don't. And we often know why. And a lot of days, we feel helpless about it because teachers don't make the big decisions in education yet. We don't have the power to build these bridges to make them more welcoming or inclusive. But we do have the power and the privilege to work with individuals. We can get down on the trail with our students and their families, and we can find their safest crossing. And furthermore, because teachers are devoted and caring, our families trust us to help them. We are the trail guides. We know how to help, and we can build relationships that offer up opportunities to help. I had an opportunity to help this young man last spring. He doesn't look very happy in this picture, and he's not. He's angry with me. We are at the top of a ropes course in northern Minnesota, and that's Lake Superior in the background. And as I am snapping this picture, he's saying to me, "I hope you're happy." And then he said, "No one's ever gotten me this far out of my comfort zone before." And it turned out that this student, even though he had fundraised all year to go on this service trip, at the last minute started to act like he didn't want to go. So I emailed his parents and I asked them if they knew what was going on. And they told me that he is deeply shy and he was worried that he wouldn't know any of the other kids on the trip. And so between the three of us, his mom and his dad and me, we figured out which of the kids going he knew. And we talked to him about it, and he did decide to go after all. And let me tell you, he opened up on this trip like you wouldn't believe. Sure, I mean, he completed a ropes course several stories above the ground, but he did something even harder for himself. He opened up to his peers. He started conversations, even with the adults chaperoning the trip. When we had a problem to solve, he said solutions. And at the end of the day, when we were sitting around the campfire, he made everybody laugh. Social connection was this student's gap. And he closed it on the trip because I reached out to his parents. I've been teaching this student for years, and she is smart and mysterious and capable. And like every other teenager on the planet, she faces some obstacles to her academic success. And whenever she hits a little bump in the road, her mom and I are back and forth on the phone. We make sure that she registers for all the accelerated classes. We make sure that she stays in them. And then when she needs some support, we make sure she gets it. And this fall, her mom said to me, "My daughter is staying with you. She's staying in your advisory because you call me. You are the teacher who calls me." So here's one simple thing that teachers can do to close the gap. We can reach out to parents. If every day we picked up the phone or sent an email to one family and started one positive conversation about one kid, say, "Oh, I don't know, I really liked the way your daughter asked me about the homework assignment," or "Your son had some really great comments in our class discussion today." At the end of a month, that teacher will have 20 positive relationships with 20 different families. That's 20 families walking around saying, our teacher really cares about our kid.
I'm going to pause this for a moment because, you know, the real reality in the public school system is that so many African American children are far below grade level. And so the personal connection for what should be going on in the classroom is not happening because our children are not completing the work. Life is about task completion, and we have to learn how to ensure that our children are on the same trajectory, same pathway as all other children. And it has to be a community effort because this is not happening individually. Quite frankly, I don't believe a lot of parents understand what they have a right to have or what they don't understand that they should have an expectation because it's been so readily accepted. I mean, that is failure. Failure has been readily accepted all across America for African American children, and willful defiance has taken the place of the maintenance effort for children to have the ability to engage in society. But know this, if a child does not and is not reading by the third grade, they're already planning on completing a prison bed for them some years later. And so, you know, we have to turn that around. That's a personal responsibility. We should not let the prison industry plan on the population of our children in the system so that they can sustain themselves. Every child has the ability to learn. We have to just engage the population and ensure that children are on a pathway that's going to be beneficial to them. Okay, and let's continue the video.
And that's 20 families who are eager to pick up the phone now when you call and eager to read your emails because they expect something positive to happen. And you know what? The more I connect with parents, the more positive stuff does happen. Those moments of connection give me the details that make the difference. They teach me what I need to know to help a kid. The best evidence I have of those moments of connection are the letters and notes I get from students and parents. And like many teachers, I keep them in a box. A lot of teachers have the special box where we keep all the letters. Mine is right next to my desk. It's in the top drawer of a blue filing cabinet. When I have a hard day, I open up that drawer and open up that box, and I read those letters, and they give me confidence and energy and strength. They make it possible for me to go forward unafraid, to advocate for my students, to say what they need to get me down on the trail, finding the best path for them. Parent connection gets me moving. So here's one simple thing that parents can do to get students across the gap. Reach out to teachers. Give us the details we need to make the difference. Historian Howard Zinn, who wrote A People's History of the United States, says that we don't have to engage in grand, heroic actions to participate in the process of change. Small acts, when multiplied by millions of people, can transform the world. The natural tendency, unfortunately, has been to leave teachers and parents out of the big decisions. So teachers don't make the big decisions in education, and neither do parents. But until we do, we should not ignore the myriad of little decisions we already do make. We know our kids, and we make countless little decisions every day that impact their chances of success. What a powerful gift for a student to know my parents and teachers are working together. They want the same success for me. When you combine the tidal force power of parental love with the professional expertise of a devoted teacher, we can get our kids across the gap. Together, we can transform our schools into collaborative communities that put the children we live our lives for at the heart of all that we do. Thank you.
Thank you for watching this video. There will be some questions at the end to help assess your knowledge. Good luck in building relationships with your students and parents this school year. Let's make a difference by developing relationships.
I want to thank you for spending some time to watch that video and understand with this transition with the virus and the closing of the public school system, it's going to be up to parents to really understand where their children are to ensure that they're being assessed and that they're making progress. There were so many African American children or Black children, or however you want to consider yourself, child of color, but formerly enslaved Black people in the public schools that were forced to integrate. And the magnet program was a huge, like a carrot. It would bring the best resources together to ensure to try to attack that poverty. And magnet programs are usually in higher poverty neighborhoods, but poverty children are usually not the ones who are in those programs. People have figured out how to get their children into the best resources. And for people who have knowledge, that's where they benefit. I mean, they make sure that their kids are in those programs that are going to lead to a future that's positive. And on the other hand, if parents never show up, they have a huge amount of people who are going to the prison system. And America has the largest population of people in prison. So we can either stay on this pathway where we're headed, or understand that it's our personal responsibility to ensure that we change and become more involved in the public school system, holding the system accountable to ensure that the tax dollars allocated is really going to meet the needs of the local community. And that's what they talk about, local control. When you're talking about local control and local decision making, that means that the local people were involved. And if you were not involved, then I guess you don't consider yourself part of the local community. You have to be a part of the policy decision making, because public policies are how they implement the law. And it's just a choice in the end. And if it's not representing your community, then your voice is unheard. So this was just an opportunity to understand about parent involvement and what it should look like and how it affects the children and what you should basically expect out of a child in the public school system. So I'm gonna stop this video for now and stop the recording. I'm gonna tell you to subscribe to my channel or follow me on Facebook, but understand that I've been doing this for more than 20 years. And it's been my blessing to be able to do that, to ensure that my children had access to America. And so the reality is that it's on you to ensure that access happens for the children that you generate in life, that you give life to. It's a personal responsibility. So this is just my little series about understanding where I've been. Not very many parents, not very many Black people have been. They didn't sit on the committees that I sat on in the last 20, 30 years. I mean, there were just so few Black people. So there are so few Black people, even if they're appointed to positions of power, there's no Black people in the community organizing around the resources that are coming to their community. And other people make that decision. Now, if that's the case, then it just leans to stand why the plantation really never ended for Black people, because they're not a part of the decision-making process about the services, and they don't get to critique them either. So there are so many children that are failing, that this needs to be a national conversation. And I don't understand why it is that African American people allow their children to be in the public school system with letter grades of F for years and years and years. And the conversation, where do you talk about that at? I mean, I knew where to talk about it. That's why I was so involved. I knew I had to address the issue when my children were not being successful, because just so happened when I was younger, I was identified as a child that needed some additional services under special education, and I got it for the list that I had. So I know that there are services out there that make a difference for children. The deal is, how do you get those services to your children? ADHD is really not an explanation as to how come your child is not learning, because we're only talking about task completion and how many times the child had the opportunity to complete the task. But what were the services rendered to ensure that they measured the progress of the child when they were learning the task? You see, it's just so much to think about. Far too much for the everyday ordinary person. because, we're living in a world where education was compulsory, meaning that by law, you had to put your child in the school system. And if you didn't, criminal charges could be applied to you. And then if you went to a school that perhaps your tax dollars weren't paying for and you didn't get permission, then, you could go to jail behind that. There are Black parents who went to jail for sending their children to a public school in the town that they live in, but because they don't live in that area, they were taking advantage of a resource that perhaps they thought that that person wasn't entitled to. But I will tell you, based on Brown versus the Board of Education and the money for integration and the money for targeted assistance to schools that have higher poverty numbers and the lack of oversight for the use of the federal dollars, because there is no oversight. When you start understanding what oversight means, is look at yourself in the mirror. Ask yourself, how have you become engaged in the public process? What are you doing? What have you done? I mean, parent-teacher meetings and conferences are critical, but if your child's failing, and you can't tell me that African-American kids are doing so well, because the data nationwide is frightening. I mean, it's scary. I mean, that's why the prisons are impounded with African-American people, because there's this gap. More than a gap. She said it earlier. There's a cliff that people walk off of. And if you're not getting a basic education, then you cannot compete in the world. You cannot be competitive. You have to be able to read and understand how to access resources. These are resources. Actually, this video is a resource. And I'm sharing with people who need to understand that they have a personal responsibility to ensure that their children are making it, and more than making it, going to have the ability to be independent. And so that's why I'm doing this series of workshops, because, when I was raising my children, I was a part of CASE, the California Compensatory, what was it? Educational something association, whatever. But I was going on conferences and they were paid for by the school district. And that was when Chapter 1 and Title 1 were part of the mandatory responsibility for local schools to ensure that all parents had access. But, over time they changed the rules and tried to figure out how to get away from having so many people involved. But in the end, after this last administration, President Barack Obama, he had California agreed to the Local Control Accountability Act, which meant that they had to have local plans, you know what I'm saying? And they were supposed to engage all people. But so many African-American people don't even know what the LCAP is. Or, the local control funding formula, they didn't get any of those acronyms, and those acronyms do exist. It's how services are being rolled out. And it talks about who should be included in the decision-making process. But when you look at the data, it's so dispiriting to you. It's disproportionate to African-American people in the state of California. And they have so many people that they get funding for. Well, the funding's just not working for them. But then their people are not talking about what's working and what's not working. Some people are, of course. We have Margaret Fortune. She got the schools in California, in Sacramento. And she is making a difference. I cannot say she's not making a difference. She is making a difference. But the difference we need to make as a people, as a personal responsibility, accepting the responsibility to be engaged in public policy. And if you're tired of them shooting our children down the street like animals, without no repercussions, no chastisement. I mean, your voice has just totally been silenced. Think about that as an American citizen and what it should offer you. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or whatever is in the Constitution. I mean, it's supposed to work for all of us. But how is it just working for some people and not working for all people? When it comes to African Americans, we're being forced to participate in a process that's not being beneficial, or that we're being denied the access to have a voice in the oversight process. So when I see the data, and it's frightening, how in Clark County, Nevada, they could have a 256% suspension expulsion rate for African-American children, and how so few would graduate, and how so few are above the 50th percentile, and how actually, I did a video earlier that showed that they only had 330 African American children in the early Head Start program or Head Start program. And I'm saying, there are so many more people here that are African American, and perhaps that's why it's critical that we all participate in the census this year, because the census will document how many children are here and what resources are available for those children. And then it's going to be the public's responsibility to ensure that the federal response and the purpose or the intent that they got the funding for is making a difference in your community. So this is all the time learning, and we're all learning. But understand me when I say this is a great opportunity, because everyone's being forced to be in the position that I was basically when I lost my job, to be at home with their children, to participate in the children's resources, to ensure that those resources are benefiting the child. So find the resources to do the basic assessments, and just don't settle for the dittos. Dittos don't demonstrate anything. It's called executive functioning skills. And can a child read and write at grade level or age appropriate level? That's what we need to concern ourselves with. So signing off for now, and I'll be back with more information for you that's already in, TEDx, or that's already out there on the web, that you may be able to understand what your role will be in the up and coming years of ensuring that access happens for all people. Thank you. Subscribe. Darlene Anderson.